Thank you very much. So it's a pleasure to be here again, right? After seeing me before the break, I'm sure you're getting tired of me, so you're only going to have to put up with that for another 30 minutes today and then an hour tomorrow. So you may want to reconsider whether you come tomorrow based on that information. So unfortunately, I was already asked a question in the panel, right, which forced me to explain who I am and what I do and why we're here and why we're interested in having these discussions. But for the benefit of those who want to learn more, I want to talk about the AI for Good Foundation, and I also want to talk about how this is related to the Financial Data Science Association, which the two work hand in glove for many years now. Now, why did we start the AI for Good Foundation? Right? And we now work in US and in Europe. We have joint entities that allow us to span the Atlantic and also organize events in multiple places. And as I mentioned, a lot of this front row is actually people who work directly with AI for Good on a regular basis. So back in 2013, we had a lot of discussions in the AI community about where we saw ourselves 10 years from now, 20 years from now. At the time, I was leading some machine learning research groups at Bloomberg, so working on the financial aspect. But I was also heavily involved with the research community on EU projects, working with Estevam, working in all kinds of areas of AI that were emerging and might have an impact not only on the financial markets, but on the economy more broadly. So thinking about innovation, entrepreneurship, how we drive the energy that might be needed to craft the economy of the future and the types of jobs that we might want in the future. Now, when we think about artificial intelligence, what do we think? Well, we think automation, we think decision-making, we think algorithms that use data in order to achieve some business outcome of value. Seldom in industry do we think about AI in the context of large global social challenges. And the reason for that is that large global social challenges are hard, right? We don't have data for most of the countries where we'd like to have, in developing countries where we'd like to have interventions. We also don't necessarily have the knowledge in those places, right? So in a country like the US, in Europe, in Brazil, right, where there are strong networks of academia that can interact with industry, right, or where these are emerging, we don't have this problem so much. But if you go to India, if you go to parts of Africa, if you go to parts of Central America, the Caribbean, where there are not these strong networks of academic research that have been invested in over years and years, there is also not the industry impetus to be collecting data and doing something interesting with it, and there is not the government understanding also of the possibilities of these technical developments. So what did we discuss at that time? Well, we said, okay, we'd like to think about ways in which we can engage the research community with these social challenges, okay? We don't necessarily think that the research community should be responsible for deciding which social challenges are important and where to do them, but because that's not the specialty of the research community. But we need to build bridges so that researchers don't just work on recommendation engines and advertising optimization and credit risk scoring and other really interesting problems that we love to work on for profit in kind of the finance industry or advertising industry and so on. But we'd like to create these bridges so that we can open up the opportunity to researchers to work on things that they feel will have a broader impact. And that was the core mission statement that we started the AI for Good Foundation with. It was, how do we get these bridges? How do we build these communities? How do we create the data and infrastructure necessary in order for researchers to get engaged with government, non-government organizations, corporations, impact organizations on the ground, to be able to start to think about these problems in the context of AI, in the context of data, and in the context of the technologies that are available globally. There are a couple of other things that we wanted to achieve also. One of these was education, so outreach and crafting what the data science and the AI curricula of the future should look like. That means working with academic research labs. It means working with the corporate industry that actually ends up doing a large portion of the training that people need in order to solve real-world machine learning problems. Because as I mentioned earlier, we do a good job teaching people the technical aspects. We don't do a very good job teaching people the hands-on aspect on a day-to-day basis. We don't do a very good job of teaching people how to collaborate effectively with these new technologies, right? It's one question to know, or it's one area to know which methodology to use, right, for a clustering problem that you've been given. It's different if you have to enter an organization, talk to 50 different stakeholders, and actually understand that this particular problem is going to be interesting and important to the organization as a whole. These are two different skill sets, but they're skill sets that, in our opinion, as researchers in this community, we have to instill in the next generation of students for them to be effective in industry. Now, the last thing that we're trying to do is to bring the benefits of these technologies, not just to the researchers where we're building the communities and allowing them to interact with new data sets and new problems, but we also want to bring that impact to the world at large. We want to be able to scale it out so that if we're doing a project with a large agricultural firm, right, where we want to try to understand global food security issues or issues in the food supply chain or issues with public health and viruses or kind of infections as they spread through the community, we don't want it to be locked in this project. We don't want it to be something that we, write once and forget about forever. We actually want these projects to live on, and that's where the community building comes in. It's where our ability to build these links across countries and across disciplines, because without that, what you end up with, and what happens a lot with government-funded projects like by the NSF or DARPA or even in the EU, is that you have a nice website for the 2 or 3 years that you have funding for, and the researchers are very excited and they build useful technology. But then for various reasons, at the end of the project, you can almost guarantee that that technology 5 years later will be sat in the same place it was originally, not being scaled out, not being implemented, not being used. And it's great for research papers. It's not so good for actually making change. So it's a one-slide presentation anyway. It doesn't matter. I was saying before, it's, once you've got me on stage, it's getting rid of me that's the hard problem. It's not whether I have slides or not. So one of the things that we like to think about is industry, right? Which is, by and large, you guys in the room, and what we are trying to do at the AI for Good Foundation, right? Why would I be talking to industry if I'm trying to solve problems like food security and water scarcity and access to good jobs and so on? Well, because ultimately, it's industry that has the resources. Oh, perfect. Yeah. Well, it's a bit big, but it's ultimately industry that has the resources to do this, and it's industry that has the interest, because what we're looking for if we want to solve big global challenges is business models that are resilient and scalable and actually have value in the real world, right? There's no point me going and defining problems that are out there and saying, okay, food scarcity is an important problem. Does everybody want to give $1, right? And we can help push forward. That's not a long-term solution. These have never been long-term solutions, right? US aid is not a long-term solution for a country. Actually, having a business model that encourages people to innovate and encourages people to get the right product to people at the right place and time is a far better approach to building resilient communities and societies and solving these challenges than having a one-off handout. And so what we're not trying to do is be a traditional charity. What we're trying to do is create an innovation framework where business models emerge that provide sustainable impact. Okay, how do we actually choose the problems that we want to work on? Well, we decided that because we're not experts in deciding what is really important on a global scale, what we should do instead is take the framework that is most worked on already, that people have agreed on. In fact, 150 plus nations have already signed up to these, and that's the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Okay. These are goals that by 2030 we would like to achieve. They include things like zero poverty, a bit ambitious by 2030. It includes food security for all, so that means that everybody should have the right intake of calories and kind of nutrients in every day, or at least the opportunity to have that. It means access to clean water and sanitation. It means access to justice, right? Judicial systems that work in order to resolve conflict and that do so effectively and quickly. It's 17 goals, right? And clearly I'm not going to get through all of them in this presentation. But important is to realize that these are 17 goals that have been ratified and agreed upon by the global community. So it's not that we're reinventing the wheel, right? It's not that we're deciding that technology is somehow a different solution set in terms of having an impact to the human solutions that we have in place. But it's how do technologies interact with the human solutions and help scale those out? Where is there appropriate use of technology for having an impact that could make the situation better? How does it work? Oh, okay. It's an interesting approach. Yeah. Well, I certainly think so. Why don't you? Yeah, maybe if we scroll really slowly, it will keep me on track, right? So the point here, and these are going to be really useless slides because it's going to look funny as they transition. But we have a framework by which we interact with industry in order to have synergies on both sides. And that involves creating events like this so that we can have communities, or the kernel of communities, right? Have a discussion moving forward that allows us to think about these problems together. Because ultimately, although you don't necessarily care about food security on a daily basis, although maybe some of you are commodities traders and you do, many of us want to be involved with solving problems at a larger scale, and many of us are looking for an opportunity to use the skills that we have on the job and the resources that our companies allocate to us in order to help promote that kind of impact. And so we like to come to these types of forums, even if we don't necessarily talk about finance the whole time, because in the audience there are always people who want to have a broad impact and have the conversations around the other problems. So community building is one thing. We also see a big effect in terms of the brand value of organizations working with us. Because obviously, on the one side, organizations want to be known as cooperating on AI for social impact and for positive outcomes in society, right? In one way or another, every single business mission that is out there tries to talk about the broader scope of the business, tries to have a positive social message that it's sending out. And we're the same, right? I say that we're for profit, right? We're for profit of the world, right? We want to bring that excess value that we see in terms of problems that are yet to be solved, and we want to extract kind of that value for all individuals that are currently suffering from not having adequate services and so on. We can just keep scrolling through this because it's going to be 6 pages of different pictures. Now, one of the questions is also about how we go from the value for us and our problems and matching that to the value that there is for firms in order to get a social impact at the end. And that includes also helping firms to identify the right talent that can both help us and help them. But, okay, so global goals, trying to build synergy between corporations, academic researchers, and the public at large, or the government, and kind of the frameworks that we want. And how do we do this in practice, right? So obviously one way would be to have corporations give very, very large sums of money, right? And then build research capabilities out and fund projects that way. What we tend to do is much more collaborative. So we actually bring together diverse interdisciplinary communities of corporations, academic research labs, governments, NGOs, interested experts on the ground. Often there are activists on the ground in various places that are trying to solve these problems. They might not be part of formal NGOs, but they are decision and thought leaders in those areas. And we try to bring these people together on a regular basis to think about these problems from a global perspective, not just about AI, but about how these problems are evolving. So for food security, for instance, we had a big program that lasted 2 years. It involved several of the largest agriculture firms in the world. We had a global challenge that we put out there to get solutions to these problems that might include artificial intelligence. We made a lot of data available that was cross-modal, from satellite imagery to phenotypic data about plant growth to climate information. And ultimately, the goal was to create that core of the community, the core set of resources, so that anybody around the world could come and help us with a part of this problem, whether or not they were part of the ongoing monthly, weekly discussions that we had with the core community, but make it so that anybody can pick up these problems and run with them as far as they can. And that what they contribute back will be positive, no matter whether they are in Brazil or in China or in Alaska or wherever they might be. So food security was one example I wanted to bring up. Another example that we have on the next slide is around childhood sleep, right? And these are just examples of different projects that we've worked on. There are many more, and also there are many events that we run. Childhood sleep is one of these things that people don't really talk about because we have very little understanding about the relationship between human beings and sleep. We're able to measure at any one time on the order of tens of thousands of neurons in the brain, and there are billions of neurons in the brain. So our understanding of anything clinical related to brain function over time is kind of like very, very early stages. With childhood sleep, there is some research that suggests that if children sleep more, they tend to have higher cognitive abilities in the future, which seems a bit obvious, right? If we suffer from sleep deprivation and long-term lack of sleep, we tend to underperform our potential as human beings. But one way that we can impact this is actually by bringing more focus on how we experiment in this area and how we actually produce knowledge and research in this area. Because currently, if you want to study childhood sleep and health and development, you bring children into a lab that has maybe 5 or 7 beds, and you force them to sleep in this lab for several days while you track variables of their behavior and their sleep patterns and so on. Guess what? For any of you who have children, probably bringing them to a lab for 5 to 7 days is not going to produce the natural environment behavior that they would have at home, right? It's not that useful. And yet that's where the millions of dollars get spent in building high-tech sleep labs in order to get this type of information. After months and months and months, you have 60 data points, right? It's not really a panel data structure, so you can't do any longitudinal studies without having lots of sources of bias. And so what we've been doing on this front is integrating with technology providers that do distributed collection of information on childhood and family sleep, and helping them to get machine learning into that model so that people in the labs can experiment in the real population by slightly modifying the treatments in observed populations. So automatically segmenting, think about it like large-scale A/B testing, as we do in the advertising world, but in the healthcare world, right? And doing that while being privacy compliant, doing that while being cognizant of different cultural norms and kind of different cultural behavioral sets is difficult, but it's one way to engage with medical data that is in the population but we don't currently have access to. Another project that we have that I also wanted to mention, where we do quite a lot of work, and it's maybe more related to what people in the room are interested in on a daily basis, is the future of employment, the future of work. And there are lots of discussions in society nowadays about what is the future of work going to look like? What is the employment structure of a country, of an industry, of a firm? How do we drive innovation, right? We're all here in the innovation kind of engine of Bradesco, of the finance industry here. Like there are, I was told, 180 plus startups inside this building, right? It's an incredible number of startups. Do those startups generate jobs in the economy at large, right? How do they generate jobs? Are they just stealing? Is it a zero-sum game? Are they taking the kind of Bradesco employees and redeploying them in the startups that they're creating? Are they having an impact on unemployment numbers? Are they using the skills of the future in such a way that those skills are going to have a network effect through the economy? These are all really big questions, right? I think we would all agree in this room that innovation is good, right? Entrepreneurship is good. We want to create jobs in companies that are growing. We want to create jobs that are high quality jobs. We want to create jobs that encourage economic innovation and education innovation. Measuring those things is difficult. These are often economic questions rather than AI questions, and they require working with experts from different disciplines. But they're also important questions because if we don't answer them, then we'll get what happens right now, which is you'll read in the media that there is about to be a loss of 4 million jobs in the driving sector in the US. Okay, well, turns out there are about 4 million people who drive as part of their job on a daily or weekly basis in the US. And if you read some of these reports, then they make the assumption that since self-driving cars are around the corner, right, that these industries naturally are going to fall apart overnight, right? And these people are going to be left without a job because now all the cars are driving around headless. And then what will happen in this case after, a year of eradicating all the driving jobs? Well, we don't really know because in history, we had agriculture, right? And agriculture was transformed and people moved to manufacturing, and manufacturing was transformed and people moved to services, and now services are being transformed, and we're working with this pyramid from 300 years ago, and there isn't anything above services, right? Therefore, the prognosis is that the world is about to collapse. That's not an economic projection, right? That's not somebody thinking about the problem. That's somebody deciding. That's like me predicting that a meteorite is going to strike tomorrow afternoon, right? But this is the kind of dialogue that we're currently having in society, and these are the types of dialogue that we want to combat, where we actually want to bring scientific thinking and reasoning to problems that are important for society, where otherwise the debate tends to move too much to extremes, right? And so on. We also work on the other 14 SDGs. Now, and these are questions that I would have liked to have on screen while I was discussing the last couple of minutes. But if we keep scrolling through, how does FDSA, the Financial Data Science Association, interact with AI for Good? Well, we are we are an organization. AI for Good sponsors the FDSA. We have joint management between the two. FDSA espouses many of the same principles that AI for Good Foundation espouses, but it does it specifically in the field of the finance and fintech space. Specifically, FDSA is responsible in several countries for setting the curriculum for financial data science education. So we work on a similar basis to CFA in the US, for setting curriculum in Germany, for instance, for helping people in the finance sector understand how data and modeling and statistics and in general kind of machine learning methodologies interact with the finance industry. We tend to bring together experts at managing director level and above from the top global finance institutions on a semi-annual basis in order to discuss innovation within the framework of the fintech industry. We also incubate startups and help to build bridges between those startups and necessary judicious uses of data science within finance. And we educate governments and regulators about how finance is changing, right? And what the big opportunities might be for regulators to help that change happen faster and more smoothly than it would otherwise, right? So this means building networks for transparent transactions on an international level, right? So that we don't have SWIFT, for instance, which is an extremely fragile mechanism for doing kind of intergovernmental, intercorporate transfers, be exploited by third parties. Or where the fixed income market can move more towards a high liquidity electronic type of exchange over time. Or how blockchain, as we were discussing in the last conversation, might have an impact on these things. And as I mentioned before, a lot of these topics, like AI, are facilitating topics. It's not that they necessarily have all of the impact by themselves, but if I walk into a room and I say AI, all of a sudden we can have that conversation about the credit structure of companies and whether it should be changed going forward. And we can have that conversation about the future of public equity markets, how useful they are. Are they offering all the things that we actually want from public equity markets, right? These are conversations that we couldn't have before we had these excuse topics like blockchain and AI in order to be able to bring up these conversations and actually try to make a difference. So FDSA operates mostly on a community building and event level. FDSAglobal.org is the website where you can sign up for our newsletters and kind of see the events that are happening. Now, one thing I did want to mention, so now that you understand AI for Good, FDSA, so Vanessa, our Executive Vice President, who's right here, has set up live streaming of this event on our aiforgood.org website. So if you have people who couldn't make it today that might be interested in the spirit of open innovation and communication, let them know. If they go to aiforgood.org, they will be able to see the live stream of everything that we have going on in the next 2 days. One thing I also want to mention is we're a membership-driven organization, right? We don't take money from large corporations. We generally don't take government money either, because we want this to be a collaborative endeavor. So what we do is we have individual members and we have corporate members. So this is a quick plug, right? What we've done for participants of this event, and if you go to our website, you'll see, is we've basically made a 50% discount for people who join us during this event. So if you want to subscribe to AI for Good Foundation and you want to be a member and you want to be able to vote in our yearly kind of annual general meeting, and you want to be invited to all of the events that we do and receive special information about what we do, and just in general support us, right? Maybe even volunteer on some projects or whichever way you want to be involved. As a corporate member, you can join us, and then as an individual, you can join us as well. One of the advantages is you get a nice email address associated with this, but the biggest advantage is that you actually get to know what we're doing and help us to do it better. And if we go to the last slide, I'm sensing, I'd say there are more slides here actually about Financial Data Science Association and how we operate, which I've already mentioned. But if we go to the last slide in the presentation, we want to work with you. We're very happy to be helping to host this event. We're very happy that all of you are interested in these topics of innovation in the fintech space and AI and social impact. So why not actually join us? Our member base in Brazil is really thin right now. We want to have more events here. Estevam is kind of in our steering committee and really helps us to guide the strategic objectives of the entire firm. So if you're a friend of Estevam and you know his work and the types of things that I've been mentioning today, and you're interested at all, do consider becoming a member and helping us out, and reach out and let us know what we're doing well and what we're not doing so well. Hopefully I've given you an idea of what we do and why we do it. I think that there's a lot of work to do in the future, right? And we're not going to reach these 17 global objectives by 2030. Hopefully we'll do some good work in some of those areas. But if you start reading through these goals, you'll quickly realize that the world needs a lot more people working on these big challenges than we currently have. And we need a lot more realization of the fact that these challenges are actually there. And that if we don't do something, they will have an enormous impact. Just to end with a quick anecdote, globally in the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of increasing tensions on a geopolitical level because of events in the Middle East, because of events tied to Syrian refugees, and so on, right? Rhetoric, government regulation, policies being put in place. So if you think about Syria, it's actually tiny, right? It's a pin drop when it comes to the number of people globally. By 2050, there are going to be an additional 1 billion young people who are born in the African subcontinent, right? The African subcontinent today does not have the education infrastructure to train those people in order to be part of a productive economy. Doesn't nowhere near the capacity necessary to do that. By just, any projections when you start looking at these numbers, unless we radically change the type of economy that exists in the African subcontinent today and the opportunities available for young people and the education that they have access to, we will have hundreds of millions of refugees who are leaving the African subcontinent over the next 20, 30 years. So if you want to think about, the humanitarian reach of working on these types of problems, if we don't do some work and actually build more resilient economies and start to think about how machine learning could potentially transform economies quickly and transform education and transform the opportunity set that young people have, we're going to be stuck with a global crisis that we haven't seen or experienced before. And that's just under one of these verticals, okay? So I'm going to leave you with that thought, that happy, positive thought. Come and talk to me in the break if you want to learn more. But otherwise, thanks very much for having me, and looking forward to more conversations.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much.